Grace Church. Great to see you here today. So, in Brooklyn, New York, a few years ago, a lady was riding on the L train, and she was doing what I do often with my cell phone, and that is she was holding it out front like this while she's on the train, and she's kind of casually holding it. And right as they came to a stop, a thief came through the subway, snatched her phone. Before she could even scream for help or yell for an alert, he was out of the train and up the stairs and gone. Seemed like the phone would never be seen again, except the thief was so excited about his victory that he went across the street there in Brooklyn and he took some selfies with his new phone, not realizing that the lady had hooked up her photos to iCloud, and she had her laptop, so within minutes she was able to give the pictures to the police, and they were able to immediately go find and arrest the man. So there you have another stupid criminal story. Well, today we're going to take a look at a scene where the disciple Peter commits an offense that is really driven by his bravado and his self-congratulatory attitude towards his ability to handle trouble. He essentially takes selfies of himself, celebrating what a great disciple he is, not realizing that soon he's going to get caught by Jesus himself right in the middle of the crime. Whoa, this is a good story. I hope you're ready. We're in the series called Flawed Faith. We're studying the OGs, the original disciples. We're studying Peter because he's the prototype of the disciples. And his journey is representative of the rest of the 12. And his journey is also representative of many of us. Some folks from Fuller Theological Seminary studied the faith development of people, and they came across this. They came up with this helpful kind of chart for us to know where we're at on different stages of faith. Now, let me call your attention to the end, stage 6, because this is the goal of this whole thing. If you're wondering where does all this lead to, the journey of Jesus or being a disciple, it leads, I pray for you and I pray for me, it leads to a life transformed by love. That's it. It's not putting on a good show. It's not perfect behavior all the time. It's not being nice. It's not everything being fine. It's being an authentic person filled with love for God, yourself, and others. Doesn't that sound good? That's what this is all about. This is not a religion. It's a relationship with Jesus, and you're invited into this great adventure. So it starts for Peter when he is in Capernaum, his hometown. He's a commercial fisherman. Jesus comes to town, and Peter has this encounter with Jesus that leads to an awareness of God. He has a miraculous catch of fish, which for a fisherman is a great thing. And it leads him to fall to his knees and say, I am a sinner. And Jesus then knows he's ready. And he says these two words to him, follow me. And he did. This begins a stage of discipleship. What is a disciple? It's an apprentice, a learner, somebody, they would say, who would follow a rabbi, but follow in the dust of the rabbi's feet. So the dust from their sandals would get on your face. That's how close we need to stay with our rabbi, Jesus. And that's what Peter did. Now, if Peter was a part of Grace Church during this stage, he would take like a couple of core courses, like a Bible study, or he might get in a small group. He might be thrilled learning the things of God. And this is an exciting stage. These three, frankly, the next one is what Peter did when he was following Jesus, the active life or serving. He actually took part in some of the miracles. Jesus invited them to go out 2 by 2 and spread the good news. So he got to get in on it. And there's nothing more thrilling than this. If you're at Grace Church, this might be you serving in our job fair that we had a couple of weeks ago, or helping with exceptional entrepreneurs, or cooking on a Friday night for Choose Recovery so that people could come in and have a good meal. If you're Peter, if you're wired like Peter, it may be leading a middle school boys small group. Oh my. Because Peter's kind of up for anything, right? Jesus says, can I have a volunteer? And Peter's always like, yes, me, I'll do it. He doesn't even tell him what it's for, right? He just is always ready to step forward. Now, this is a wonderful stage until we get to the wall. Everybody say the wall. Turn to your neighbor and say the wall. The wall. The wall. What is the wall? Well, we learned last week that the wall is kind of where a crisis of faith comes in. And here's why this message is so important. I mean, I woke up today, I was excited because I think I can help somebody here today. I think the Lord's given us some material through our teaching team, not through me, through the Bible, and to help us, because here's what we've discovered, is that most followers of Jesus, can we go back to that chart? Missy, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place, but you're good. Look at that. Wow, that was awesome. So a lot of Christians spend their time right here. This is it. They don't take the step being transformed by love because it involves the wall. The wall. Well, what's the wall? Last week, Pastor Taylor Brown gave us this definition of the wall. It's when our will conflicts with God's will. When our will conflicts with God's will. Oh, this is no fun. And that's why this is the important part. 85% of followers of Jesus, the researchers at Fuller came up with, don't make it through the wall. They either just go backwards. You know what? I'll just go back to a Bible study. Thank you very much. Or they go, they stay in service, or they just leave. And you might be saying, well, what is so bad about the wall? Well, the wall is when our faith is shaken, and our faith, as we have it in our brain, is not working out. I've had many of these moments in my life. We hit the wall sometimes, several times in our journey. I can remember praying for somebody that I loved to be healed, and they weren't. I remember praying for my own self to get healed, and I wasn't. I remember looking for God, and I couldn't find the direction that I thought I needed. I've had a lot of those times. Have you ever had one of those times where you just hit the wall? How does this make sense? God, what are you up to? It's where our will starts to conflict with God's will. Because unlike the country song, I don't often thank God for the unanswered prayer. I'm not always thankful about that. In fact, I get mad. And sometimes I get mad at other people when I'm really mad at God. The problem goes on and on. Let's see if you have ever had an experience with the wall. Author Pete Scazzaro describes it this way in his book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. He says, for most of us, the wall appears through a crisis. It turns our world upside down. Ever been there? It comes perhaps through a divorce, a job loss, the death of a close friend, or a family member. A cancer diagnosis. This one's hard. A disillusioning church experience. Yeah, we have those even here at Grace Church. A betrayal, a shattered dream, a wayward child, a car accident, an inability to get pregnant, a deep desire to marry that remains unfulfilled, a dryness or loss of joy in our relationship with God, a building permit even denied by the community for the fourth time. This wasn't just written for Cape Coral, so everybody relax. And I will continue on. Regardless of how we get there, every follower of Jesus at some point will confront the wall, where our will collides seemingly with God's will. So let's go back to our chart. Many people hit the wall right after this wonderful experience of discipleship, and you learn you're a cog-pal, child of God, person worth, whoa, this is great. Oh, man. And then we go serve, and you're like, well, other people, look at the joy I feel serving. This is great. And then, we hit the wall. We hit the wall. And what do we do when we hit the wall? Well, a little sneak peek. We'll come back to this in a minute. Is when we hit the wall, we need to do a journey inward with Jesus. This is a time for soul searching. It's a time that Psalm 139 explained like this. David praying, search me, O God, and know my heart. It's a time for us to mature, to grow up. And for Peter, his wall begins when he is invited by Jesus on the night that Jesus was betrayed to go with Jesus to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane. And Peter, well, I'll just summarize it. He falls asleep. The Savior of the world says, my soul is burdened and he's sweating blood. He asks his good friend Peter, come with me. Keep watch, pray with me. And what does he do? He falls asleep. Can't blame the guy. It's got to be overwhelming to be Jesus' buddy and his disciple. Judas is out getting ready to betray him. And indeed, that's what happens. So Peter wakes up when the army comes, when the soldiers come to arrest Jesus. He wakes up enough to get his sword out and lop off a guy's ear. right there. And Jesus has to heal the guy before he can go be betrayed. He has to heal the guy. And then he has to say to Peter, Peter, what are you doing? Because basically, Peter is missing the invitation to fight a spiritual battle in prayer, and he chooses to fight a spiritual battle with a human sword, with human might. Do you see what's happening here? Peter's still missing it. But this is just the start of the night. In fact, it's going to get worse. Everybody say, uh-oh. Oh boy, you're right. See, earlier in the evening, Jesus had warned them. He warned them straight up at the Last Supper what was getting ready to go down. I think so he could say, this is your last chance, man. Don't do it. But if you do, here's some instruction for you. And we know this is intense because Jesus uses Peter's given name that his mama gave him. So it's like when my mom used to come out and go, Wesley Howard Olds, get in this house. Uh-oh. Right. So look with me at what happens in this exchange with Jesus. At the Lord's Supper, he says, not Peter, Simon, Simon, uh-oh. Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, there's a missing sentence in here, it seems to me. In other words, he knows he's going to fall, right? Because Jesus just goes, hey, look, when you turn back, strengthen your brothers. All right. But watch Peter's reply. If he had an iPhone, this is where you start taking selfies. And he'd say, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death. Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. Whoa, this is an intense passage. Let's start with the beginning sentence. Jesus says, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. Whoa. Remember, Peter is the prototype disciple for the original bunch, but for us too. So I didn't want to just run past that sentence. What is Jesus saying here? He's awakening Peter to the reality of the wall, that there's more going on than just emotional strain or circumstances we don't like or prayers that are unanswered. What's going on here is that Satan himself is threatening to undo him. See, there's a spiritual component that we need to keep in mind as followers of Jesus. And that is that there is an enemy who wants to take away your joy, take away your growth as a disciple, to tempt you. Now, some people tell me, look, I don't believe in the devil, and I think that's wonderful. If you can do that, I believe in the devil because Jesus did, and Jesus encountered him. Now, Jesus doesn't tell his disciples to freak out about this. In fact, he just wants Peter to be alert to the reality of all that's going on and this temptation that's coming his way. So let me say this about the problem with evil for us, is that we don't need to be alarmed by evil, but alert to it. We need to be alert to the presence of evil, especially when we are already weak. The devil, I think, is looking to pounce at those moments and to take us down. The devil's not only against Jesus, he's against Jesus' followers. And yet Jesus says, greater is he that is in you, meaning Jesus that lives inside of us, than he, Satan, that's in the world. Amen? So we don't have anything to fear, but we do need to be aware of this situation. All right, the story continues. Let's go on to Peter being tempted in this way where he has to figure out a deeper level of faith. The sifting of wheat is a common image because the wheat has to be separated from the chaff. And the disciples are all going to face this pressure. Jesus gives them this word of assurance. But I've prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And here's the missing sentence, but it's gonna. And when you've turned back, strengthen your brothers. Now, isn't it incredible that Jesus prays for Peter? I want you to think about this. Jesus praying for you and me. Wow. The Bible says that Jesus is a high priest who intercedes for us to the Father. And I like to have prayer partners in my life. You know what I've realized the last couple weeks living in this passage is that the best prayer partner I've got is Jesus. No offense to some of you who are my prayer partners. I mean, I love you guys, but I like to have Jesus as a prayer partner too, and you need that prayer partner in your life. And just know that Jesus' grace and love for you extends to the point that even when he knows Peter is getting ready to crash and burn, he says, Peter, I'm praying for you. But Peter, well, he is still filled with his ego. He's filled with his bravado. Look again at his declaration. He says, I'm ready to go to prison with you. Even death, Lord. Right? He is just so full of himself that Jesus has to remind him, you're going to deny me, and then the rooster will crow. I understand, Peter. A lot of times in my life, when it comes to the wall especially, I want to white knuckle my way through. I want to power my way through. Do you ever face this when you're facing some kind of difficulty in your life? Just got to buckle down. We got to make it through. I'll force my way through if I have to. When I was diagnosed with aortic valve disease and had open heart surgery, the doctor told me on my last day in the hospital, I needed to be careful in the recreational activities that I took part in for the rest of my life. And that rung in my head, and it felt like weakness that I did not like. And so what it was underneath all that was really fear. I didn't know that at the time because I was hitting the wall. And I thought, God, this is not fair. I'm 25 years old, and I can't do any adventurous stuff. So I said to myself, let's go for it. 1 year to the date of having open heart surgery, I went rock climbing in Montana. Shortly after that, I went snow skiing in New York. After that, I rented a motorcycle in Key West. I went water skiing in Orlando. I just was living like on the edge. It's a wonder that I didn't crash and burn. Something terrible didn't happen because I'm not exactly athletic. A black diamond means tumble, 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 tumble. All the way down he goes. Thank God for gravity. But underneath all that bravado in my life was this desire to just power my way through on my own ingenuity, on my own strength. And a lot of us do that when we hit the wall. And remember, when we hit the wall, the journey is to go inward with Jesus, not outward with our own strength. Look at me. Look at how creative I am. I'm going to outsmart, outwit, outlast you. No, that's not the goal here. And so we're going to look at what happens to Peter with this bravado, and it's not good. Everybody say, uh-oh, again. Here we go. Let's take a look at the scene. All right, so this is after Peter lops the guy's ear off. Jesus heals him. And then the guards, seizing Jesus, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance, and when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. And a servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at Peter and said, "This man was with him." But he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, somebody else saw Peter and said, "You also are one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you are talking about." And just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. Uh-oh, you're right. Uh-oh. So Jesus is led away. Peter goes on this Jason Bourne treadstone mission to follow along behind stealthily. And he sneaks past the security on the high priest's estate, the courtyard, past the guards, past the security. He slips in and he sits down at a table next to the firelight where all the staff and the servants are. The fire is burning there, a charcoal fire, and a woman notices him, says, "Hey, you were with Jesus, weren't you?" And he says, "No, I don't know Jesus. I don't know the man." Strike one. And then another person says, "You were with Jesus and them, those disciples." And he says, "I don't know what you're talking about." No. That's strike what? Two. That's right. He denies knowing Jesus and then he denies Jesus and his fellow disciples. And then last, somebody says, I recognize your accent. You're from Galilee, up north where all the hillbillies live. See, their country was reversed. The South was actually in the north. I can say this, I'm from Kentucky. And so they recognized his accent. And he's like, no, I don't know the man. I don't know him. No. I don't know the disciples. I don't know him. None of them. And even worse, when he says he doesn't know anything that happened in Galilee, he's denying his own spiritual heritage, isn't he? That's where he was called. That's like me denying Kentucky. Never. My old Kentucky home, no. And he denies Galilee. He denies the experience he had with Jesus on the shore of Capernaum. He denies the calling and the moments of the first miracles took place. He's denying all of those things. And if you think things can't get worse, well, then the rooster crows. And then look what happens. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Oh, no. If you think it couldn't get any worse. This is terrible. Right at the high priest's house, we don't know how far apart they were, but maybe Jesus was taken to that window or that door where right there, Peter's right there, they locked eyes. Oh no, this is terrible, terrible, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. The Bible tells us in this phrasing that this look and turn are ones of great concern and correction. It's a rebuke. So we get clues from the language as what kind of a look this was. And it was one of sadness and disappointment in Jesus' eyes. Can you imagine disappointing Jesus that way? Well, frankly, I can. Because I have. And that moment brings Peter back to his senses. Look at me, what happens? We see that Peter remembers the word that the Lord spoke to him before the rooster crows today. You will disown me 3 times. Okay, he's right. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. He wept. What's going on? He is journeying inward now. And this is remarkable because he doesn't say, well, no fair, they pressured me. He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't go, Jesus, well, this is your fault. You never told us where you're going to get arrested. Well, he did, but I wasn't listening when you told us. So let's go back to our little diagram here. Where are you in your faith, by the way? If you're hitting a wall, the journey now is to go inward. It's to go journey with Jesus to a deeper place where our faith can mature. So how do we do that? Here comes a 6-minute seminar. Are you ready? Here's how we go journey inward with our faith. The question is, how do I make that journey inward to mature in my faith? Well, following Peter's next few moves here, the first is to reflect on Jesus' face. To look at Jesus' face and to see the love that he has for you and me enough that he actually cares. I had a football coach in high school who yelled at me for years, all the time through high school. He yelled at me all the time. Practice, film room, games, timeouts. He's always yelling, Olds, Olds. It's driving me crazy. And so finally I went up to him and I was like, Coach, why are you always yelling at me? You're freaking me out. And he said, son, I see potential in you, and so you don't need to worry. In fact, if I ever stop yelling at you, that's when you start worrying. I was like, okay. He said, I'm going to coach you hard. Now, thankfully, Jesus doesn't yell at us the way my coach Walton did. But he does correct us. He does correct me. He does have concern and can set us back on the course when we are wandering away to our own demise. Are you catching this? Because this is agape love that Jesus has for you and me. It's not puppies and rainbows and Hallmark cards where you're fine and I'm fine and everything's fine. No. If I'm fine and you're fine, then have you looked at the world today? Who's messing everything up? We are. Sin is. Satan is. And Jesus came to save us, to deliver us, to correct us out of his love and his grace. And so we need to look into his face. When I was an immature follower of Jesus, I didn't look into the face of Jesus. I looked at his hand. I wanted his hand. I wanted stuff from his hand. I wanted life to go the way I wanted it to go. I wanted handouts. I wanted a hand up. I sought stuff, you know what I mean? But as I've grown closer into my relationship with Jesus, I no longer only seek his hands, I seek his face. I want to turn my eyes upon Jesus and look full into his wonderful face, because there the things of earth grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and his grace. It's a relationship where we can look at each other, and that's the first move inside. And the second is this. This journey inward is where we remember Jesus' words. Peter does this. He messes up, and then after that, he remembers what Jesus says. After you fall, go return to your brothers. Get with the other disciples. In other words, don't stay by yourself, because he went on this rogue mission, stealthily following Jesus, and in the courtyard, he's by himself. He's not with his brothers. He's not with the community. And frankly, we need each other when it comes to the journey inward. You might write this down, that the journey inward is one we must take individually, but we do not take it alone. Big difference. I need to make my journey, you need to make yours, but we don't need to make it alone. Now, at Grace Church, I'm grateful we do not practice excommunication. On occasion, I've been asked to excommunicate some of you, but I've said no. Some of you have asked that I be excommunicated. And the answer is no. We're in this together, friends. And let me remind us, we don't practice that at Grace Church. In fact, it breaks my heart when people excommunicate themselves. That's what we see. If people do something in their life, and then they just decide, I can't come back there. I can't be a part of a church anymore. Look at my life. Look what I did. And friends, that's not true, because you're not considering the grace of Jesus. And we need each other even though we're imperfect people. Let me remind us that Grace Church is not a museum for saints. It's a hospital for sinners. And here, let me make this loud and clear, we do not shoot our wounded. We need one another to help each other. I got my small group sitting there in the front row. Said to me several years ago, as I was describing my problems and my thought patterns, he told me at 7 o'clock in the morning at a restaurant, Wes, your mind is a dangerous neighborhood. He said, never, ever go in there alone. You need a chaperone. And that's true. I need you, and you need me. Even when we hit the wall, especially when we hit the wall. All right, number 3, here we go. Return to following Jesus. That's what the journey inward is. We reflect on his face, we remember his words, but then we return to following Jesus as in our first love, as in the days that we first had an awareness of Jesus, when our faith was more innocent and trusting. This is what happens, I think, with Peter. Remember how Peter began his journey? He fell to his knees and he said, Lord, I'm a sinner. And Jesus is like, okay, we both agree. We know you're usable now, you're teachable. Follow me, he says. And see, what happens is sometimes I start to think I've got it all together. And so again, I puff myself up. And I need to remember that I'm a sinner. And I return to following Jesus where he's the leader, not me. He's the leader of my life. And we see this in the rest of Peter's journey. We're going to finish it out next week. It's going to be an incredible passage of scripture we're going to look at. But we don't see Peter doing some of the stupid stuff anymore. He makes this journey inward and he puts away his sword. He makes the journey inward and he's not as impulsive. He makes the journey inward and he doesn't speak for Jesus and tell Jesus what he's going to do. Instead, he focuses all of his energy on helping others know Jesus and living a life transformed by love. So what does all this mean? Well, you've probably had an epic fail or two in your life, have you? You don't have to say it out loud, but I've got mine, and you've got yours. And here's the good news today. I'm so excited to share this with you. Well, here it is. Even when I deny Jesus, he doesn't deny me. Everybody say, woo. Oh, that's good, isn't it? I want you to think just for a moment about the worst sin you've ever committed. Go ahead. You don't have to say it out loud, okay? Just think about it. Maybe close your eyes. Think about that sin that even maybe it still haunts you today. Can you think of that for a moment? Now hear this good news. Even when I deny Jesus, he doesn't deny me. He will never, ever, ever stop loving you. He will never, ever, ever stop offering you grace and forgiveness. The invitation to come home is still available for you as it was the prodigal in Jesus' own story. Let me close with this story. My senior year of high school, man, I was full of myself. I was on top of the world, so I thought. And my parents had set a curfew for me. I thought, looking back, it was quite generous now that I've been a parent. At midnight is when I had to be home. And beyond that, I could call and ask for an extension. But midnight was kind of the agreed upon thing. Now, at the same time, I had what's called a paper route, which meant that at 6 o'clock in the morning or so, I had to go out and deliver papers for our neighbors. Now, newspapers were these things that we had back in the 1800s that used to be the modern equivalent of social media or X or like news. And so they would print these on paper, and you would take them out and throw them at the door. Anyway, you can look it up. So one night, Friday night, we were out. I was celebrating a game. We won our football game, so I was out with my friends, and I noticed that the clock said not 11:45 time to go. It said 4 a.m. Yeah, I know. That's what I said. I was like, oh, guys, I'm in trouble. And so I immediately got to work, and I came up with this ingenious plan that I was going to sneak home. And first thing I would do, though, is go deliver my papers so that when I came in the house, my parents heard me come in the house, they would think that I was coming back from my paper route and not just getting home. Pretty smart. So that's what I did. I left the party that I was at, and I drove immediately to my paper route, and I delivered all my papers. Took an hour or so. And then I got home, and the house was dark. It was like, 6 o'clock, 5:45. And I went through the bottom basement door, and then I made it up the first flight of wooden steps. And then I had to turn across the main floor. I made it past my parents' bedroom. Crossing the main floor, though, I saw a light on in the living room. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And so I had to go up one more flight of steps to my brother's room, and we were up the top. So I come past the living room, and I see my mom sitting in her prayer chair with her Bible out, her journal out, a cup of coffee, and a bunch of used Kleenex. And I said, hey, Mom, just got back from delivering those papers. Always a lot of work. I gotta deliver the papers every day, don't I? And she's like, yes, you do. I said, so what are you doing up? She's like, oh, I didn't hear you come in last night, and so I just got up about 12:30 and decided I would just spend the night praying for you to make sure you're okay. And I was praying for your safety, but I was also just praying that God would bless your life and that you would know and become a man after his own heart, and that he would just be your Lord and leader of your life. So that's what I'm doing. I said, okay, good night. And I went upstairs, and I started that journey inward. And I was like, is this who I want to be? Because I could just see in my mom's eyes, man, she was worried, and she was disappointed. But she wasn't like raging at me. In fact, she never told my dad. I know he's finding out right now in heaven. I never got grounded. In fact, we've never spoken of it. And yet that night, I needed to grow up. And it came from the journey inward. Wes, is this who you want to be? I started to ask myself, do you want to be? No. And it was the Lord's correction in my life through my mom. But underneath that, here's the assurance that I have, and had even at that time, is that Jesus would never give up on me. The same as my mom, she would never give up on me. If I'd never come home that night, she'd still be praying right now. And friends, you need to know that that is the same love that Jesus has for you. He will never leave you or forsake you. He will not leave you as an orphan. He will come to you. His love never fails. It never gives up. It never runs out on you. This is the love that Jesus has for you. And it goes beyond comprehension. It goes beyond our human imagination. And yet, while we were still sinners, Jesus crawled upon a cross and he died for us while we were unworthy. And before Peter denied him, and before Judas betrayed him, knowing all of these things would happen and the disciples would all run and abandon him in his hour of need, he took bread after their last supper together. And out of love, he broke the bread, but then he said, "This is my body that is given for you." And he said, I want you to do something. I want you to take a journey inward. And every time you take and eat this bread, remember me. Taste, see, experience that love. And likewise, after supper, he took a cup. And he said, this is my blood shed for you. Every time you take and drink this, remember me. Do that journey inward. Remember, not in a past historical some kind of way. I'm talking about it right now, here with us, love. Remember his love present with us. Oh, what wondrous love is this? I hope you know it. I hope you can experience it, even if you're at the wall.